Hello, this is an instructional tutorial about how to use the Spurpunk drop-down menu item here, Spurpunk import level. So when you first read in the project for Spurpunk and you press play, you can of course play the game, but there are other modes that you can go into where you can actually add some items to these levels, and we're going to need to do that because, as you can see, the levels themselves are rather naked without these frames around them, this section here, etc. So using this level as an example specifically, and again this is something you need to make sure of, you need to make sure what you know your level is. So in this case we'll have level 9. So level 9 is the one that doesn't have this background filled in, and we need to fill it in. So first thing I'm going to do is actually pause the play. And that does not mean this pause button, but rather this pause button for Unity, not the game, but Unity. So pause it, and what happens is, well, you probably are on this screen. The game stops because it's no longer playing the game, but there's different tabs up here in the upper left-hand corner in Unity that allow you different views of the same thing. Now this we're used to because we've all played the game. However, when you click on Scene, you actually see sort of the behind the scene of what's going on in the game. This is a bit confusing, but I'll try to explain. The two-dimensional elements have a different camera than the three-dimensional elements and are much larger. So the UI, as we call it, the user interface, these 2D buttons, live in this transparent billboard and are being filmed by one camera simultaneous to the game going on in 3D, and these assets live down in the far corner down here. Some of the navigation tools you might want to get used to, by the way, is if you click the Alt button and you click the left mouse button and keep it down, you actually get to rotate. And I'm using a PC. If there's some change of the Mac, you can always go Google the changes on the Unity forums. And another thing you can do is I have a roll bar on my mouse to go in, but this is actually kind of small considering that the 3D elements are this tiny little pinpoint in the lower right hand corner of the UI. So in the hierarchy window, and by the way, you may want to take a moment, pause this, and set things up as I have it here, where I've got the project window, the hierarchy window, the inspector window. You can click under window and look for various layouts to start you off, and these are the individual ones, and you just sort of shuffle them around because they actually, if you grab the top tabs and move them around, they sort of combine and let you do that. So take a moment to make sure that we're all on the same page. The thing I wanted to point out is because things are so tiny and so disparate as far as the scaling, one method you may want to use to go in very close on the 3D elements is to click on the expansion triangle here for level, and under the hierarchy window this pretty much has everything you see on the screen, and you can click on it using the just click on the text of what that is. So the canvas is the UI elements I was talking about. The world is the 3D world. So if we click on that and we're in the modeling window and I press F, it zooms in because F is short for frame, and then this allows me a much faster way of going in and looking at the 3D elements. When you click on world, of course, it selects everything with this orange outline, so it looks very strange, but when you click off of it, you can sort of see the 3D world. Let's go back to the game, and now we're seeing, okay, I see where we are. If we see this empty bit and go back to scene, we see that we have to fill in this empty area. So here's basically how things break down. If you bring up the Spurpunk import level window, and be very careful what you're doing from here on out, because unfortunately this does not have an undo button. So if you make a mistake, just don't commit it and revert and you'll be fine. But this pop-up window, by the way, make sure that you have it scaled out to where you can read all the options here. I made the mistake of just having it like this, and I didn't know where the buttons were. Here we are. What this does is that I have several different 3D elements for everything here in the level. So what that means is when you're modifying your level in the Excel sheet, I have 3 different environments. One is called Death Valley, the other one is called Burial Grounds, and the third one is called Mayan Ruins. And all the individual parts you can see here, I have a naming convention. So now we're in the project window, going down here under the resources and terrain. Burial grounds, we're actually in Death Valley. So when you click on that, you see all the different elements that constitute Death Valley. And I've given them a naming convention for the acronym of that set, DV_F_build spot. And all of the different elements have this same naming convention exactly, save for the prefix. So if I wanted to go to Death Valley, corner 1, burial grounds, BG, corner 1 has an equivalent as well. And you see that it's kind of the same thing, it's just a different art set. What that allows us to do is to quickly change the prefix for these and have it modified to a different art set. So up here, it's by default on Death Valley. However, if you click on this and type in burial grounds, make very sure you have exactly what I have here, which is camel case, capital B, capital G, no spaces between, and then the short name is lowercase bg. You then want to save that art set. Click on that. Basically, Unity now will draw that path using this art set. And you do that by clicking up here under Clear Path, and then Create Path, and boom, it now draws that same path in the burial grounds setup. And that's how we are able to design levels for 36 levels, and yet we're able to divide all of the levels in threes, and the first half uses Death Valley, the first third uses Death Valley, second third uses burial grounds, the last third uses Mayan Ruins. And that sort of explains this here. And if you wanted to, you can type in Mayan Ruins just to see what it looks like. MR, save that art set. Make sure to clear the current path, then create path. And then boom, we've got these cool Mayan Ruins going on. So that's just sort of a switcheroo for the art, but the game is still the same. And that's what this does. I'm going to go back to Death Valley, DV, because that's really what this should be in level number 9. So clear the path, create the path, there we are. So we're back to the beginning. That's all cool. What else can this do? Well, as you notice, there are some elements here, and you click on these elements individually, and let me just move this down. So what Unity has done is it has a collection of, under the world, it has the grid, which is what you've designed in the Excel sheet, and it dresses it up using these little art bits. And then it has a different collection for the what we call props. And the props are pretty much everything that, like this cactus, these skulls, cow skulls, and also the framing of the cliff edges. And all of these things were brought in one at a time by me to get put together in kind of a default setup of that frame. And when I refer to a frame from here on out, I'm referring to the surrounding geometry that frames the level you've designed. So the level itself is created automatically. We took care of that. But there was no way for us to accommodate it with a frame, given that we had no idea what the different size of the levels would be. You can make them longer, you can make them wider. They weren't all going to be a particular matrix. So we couldn't automate something that made a surrounding cliff wall. Now that's the good news is the level is created automatically. The bad news is you need to create the frames by hand. The good news, again, is you can simply read in a previous frame and modify it. So in this case, what was brought in was a frame for a much bigger level. And all we have to do is kind of grab this geometry and move it forward so that it now aligns here. And what I'm trying to do is explain every bit of this menu pop-up and then give you the kind of the instructions of how to save things. So we know about the clear the path, create the path. We also, now that I've explained what props are, you can clear the props and load the props. So this read it in. Wait a minute, why did that cover everything, Scott? Well, because what we did is we read in the props from level 1. You see that there? We actually want level 9. So let's clear the props again, load the props for level 9. Ah, there's that discrepancy we cited earlier. So when you read in the props, you can actually save it for that level. So a really easy fix in this case is to read in clear props, load props for level 1. Well, that's perfect, isn't it? And then press save props. Now, be careful. You've read it in from level 1. If you press save props, it's going to save it for level 1, not level 9 as we need. So you can save it like this. The problem is we don't know if we're overwriting anything, because we want to make very sure we don't have the props, i.e. the frame, actually intersecting over the level. And the best way to do this is to say clear the props and clear the path and then load the props. Okay, we should have something just that big as the path. And does that work? It looks like it works, but let's do this. Create path, yep, and then load props. Okay, it fits it exactly, and that's kind of what you want to make. You want to make sure that it's doing the right thing. Now, I just made a mistake because I've been using number 1 instead of number 9 for create path. That's the path for number 9. You see how dangerous this can get as far as, oh, I'll just read something in and I'll press save. Whoops, I saved over something I didn't mean to. And that's kind of the dangerous part about this. There is no undo. So be very careful what you're doing. Be very methodical what you're doing, because what you can do is kind of zip through this and then save over something by mistake, and that reference is now gone. The good news is I made a lot of copies of pretty much the same thing, the same frame. So if I clear the path and then load props for level number 2, it's kind of the same as level number 1. Take a look at this. Clear props, load props, kind of the same thing. So this allows you, however, to say, since we're dealing with level 9, load the props for level 9. Clear props, load props, just to be clean. And then create path. Okay, now we're right on track. That's good. And a faster way of doing this is, of course, to simply read in level number 1. But let's, for the sake of an argument, just say it's impossible. Why? For a lot of different reasons. We don't know the reasons. We need to make something custom. Let's say that, for instance, this is a much weirder or longer level this way, and we simply can't read in a previous frame and then affix it to this level's path design. Well, these are all still individual pieces you can left click on, and you can see that they are going to be corresponding to a selection here under, again, the props. Because remember that there's 2 sets here, and one is the grid, and that's the grid in the Excel sheet that you designed, and the second one is the props. So every level is a combination of 2 things. Why did we do this? Because we wanted Unity to read in a set of art and make as many custom levels from those same parts as possible. And we wanted to kind of just shift things around and make it look like it's new every time. So let's say that to fix this, using this level, we need to grab this lip of the cliff and kind of shove it all back. Well, that means we're probably going to be overwriting. We're going to take geometry and shove it back. We're going to be putting 2 bits of polygonal geometry on top of itself. We don't want to do that. So I'm going to make an educated guess here of what I need to delete first, which is kind of these 2 pieces. And you can, once you select those, press F to get in there, get close and personal, and say, okay, maybe one more bit of geometry there, and then delete. And it just deletes them. And now, take note of the fact that the UI billboard is kind of cutting this level off right here. Does that matter? Yeah, it does. Here's why. Unity defaults to thinking that you are selecting something on this UI when you try to select through it. And that's maddening, because you can select outside in front of it just fine. But when you come over here and you try to select these cliffs, it looks like you're unable to do so. So what you need to do is just press the Alt button, hold down the left mouse key, and swing over to the other side, and you can click on the cliffs there, that way. So we're going to do the same operation over here. You just grab that bit of geometry, delete, and then I'm going to sequentially select all of these, that lip, by either selecting one and then shift selecting the other bits. There's something else I can do. Get up there close and personal because I can't tell otherwise if I've selected something, because unfortunately the orange outline is masked by the kind of orange texture that we have on this geometry. So top view is also really nice to select everything in one fell swoop like so, and I'm holding down the shift key because I want it to add to my current selection. Missed a couple here, so I'm just going to click on those individually. Some are harder than others, so again with the F, that doesn't help. Use the scroll bar, get in there, boom. So now I've got pretty much what I think I need to have. And if I want to move this, I can move it, but I need this to snap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little hotkey in Unity, which is hold down the control key and move everything at once. And it actually kind of shifts. You see that kind of shuffling going on there? So I'm popping this over to where it needs to be, and I see that I haven't deleted enough geometry, which is unfortunate. So what I'm going to do is I could, one of two things. I could delete more geometry and kind of shove it forward, and we can do it this way. But let me try another way. No, actually, let's just do that. So I'm going to delete that geometry. It looks like it's going to align nicely now, if I did it right. No, I don't think I did do it right. It looks like we're not able to... It looks like we're not able to align this perfectly, but that's okay. We'll just use this as a further lesson. So what you can do, what I'm thinking of doing in this case, is actually taking this geometry and moving it back so that it now fills this area up. And to do that, I can hold down the control key and it just kind of pops on back there. Move this over, control, and you can just grab these manipulators and move them over. One of the things I'm going to show you next is how to take new geometry, because I know that we're reusing a lot of geometry, but what if you come in and you've made something so custom that you need a completely new frame of cliff walls, etc.? Where do you go to get new stuff? What if you need to get one more slice of the ground, or you need one more cliff wall and you don't have that? Right now we have a surplus of everything, so we're able to just kind of repurpose everything, but what if that's not possible? So I'll show you how to drag things in and just use new geometry. Boom, and then delete that. Okay, so it looks like we've got this lip ready to grab all at once. Oh, yeah. It's funny. You need to actually have the entire bit of the geometry inside your selection square before it recognizes it, not just a part of it. Okay, so now I'm ready to move this back, holding down the... Well, that was odd. My arrow disappeared, so I'm going to unselect and then just select everything one at a time. Hold down the control key, pop. Looks like it's all kind of slammed into place. Very happy about that. And going to bring up the window again, Spurpunk import level. Make sure that I change this to level 9. And now I'm going to save the props because this is exactly as I need it. Boom. So when I save the props like this, now I can clear them out, load the props, it comes exactly as I've modified it. So what import level does is it remembers for that level that you've typed in the specific combination of these pieces. And when you change them, you need to click on Save Props, and it will save it for that level. And again, I really stress that you need to make very sure you're doing this methodically, because mistakes can happen very quickly, and it takes a while to kind of make up for it. But again, if you've just recently messed up, you can always revert. But if you don't save your work often, you revert to all the work and you could lose an entire hour's worth of work. So that's sort of half of it. The other half is that, as you can see here under Death Valley, under Resources, Terrain, Death Valley, these are all the pieces, and if you click on them, you can see them here in the viewport. If you need a new one, what you need to do is make very sure that you are dragging them in and including them, not in grid, but under props when you need them. So if I were to use a new, let's say I want to put a little flat bit of ground here. Now these are corners. This is part of the pathway. You don't want that. You don't want any of the path that is actually used for traversal. You see that kind of light in the light yellow, the sand yellow. You don't want to use that for arbitrary pieces because people will get confused as to what that's doing up there. What you need to have is sections of the desert, and these are named 1 through 4. I want to use this piece, and all I need to do is drag it up into this area and put it under props, and then there it is. And I drag it over. Whoops, I didn't use the control key, but now it's off, and I can't quite get it where I want it. Well, the way you do this, you could sit here and kind of pop around and hope you can shuffle it by hand, which is pretty easy, but sometimes things are just not as it doesn't allow you the precision you need. If something's off by half, as you see it is here, you need to compensate for it. And how you do that is you come over here to the transform and you note which direction you need it in by just holding down control and just popping back and forth. What number is changing? It's Z, or if you're from Canada, Z. And it's 14, popping between 14 and 15. Need to make that a whole number, so 15, boom, and then pop that back. Now it fits. So I want another desert piece here, and I want to be very careful about taking this desert piece, and don't replace. Taking this desert piece and putting it on up here in between things. See, what happens is, unfortunately, if you put it over onto something, it would kind of renames it, which is not really what you want. Anyway, we've got that piece right there, and we've got another piece here, and a third piece. I don't want to select multiple things. One bit of the desert, boom, like that. It looks like it's better to drag it into the 3D space because then it doesn't rename it. So do that, because then you can grab it and kind of bring it down to this props area and just pop it in there. These other ones are now renamed, so I gotta kind of fix that. Okay, it looks like there's if I left my caps lock on, because it's just clicking everything that I don't need right now. So let me unclick everything. Okay, so what happened was it was clicking everything, and I just pressed Control and then Alt and Shift, all one at a time, and then it's kind of knocked it back into Sense. So if I click on DVF Desert and it's got that renaming, you don't want that renaming. Just get rid of that because it doesn't apply in this case. So let's go back to the different props that we had, the different sections I was bringing in. And we can see, so see, when things come in, they're kind of on top of one another. So make sure that you don't have a bunch of geometry where it's kind of hiding other geometry. And this can get sort of confusing because there's so much already here. But this will allow you to kind of look at the different pieces, especially when you're doing corner pieces, and use not just translate, but in some cases scale. Because I took the geometry for corner pieces of the cliff and I just scaled them in -X or -Z, I can't remember which, to make them kind of mirror pieces so I didn't have to create totally new geometry for Unity. So this might be a good example of something that's just floating too high and I can't quite pop it down to where I need using that control. So again, we come over here to transform, and I'm going to type in whole numbers to see if that sorts it out. And it seems to help immensely. 6, 2, and 15 just by rounding up. So we've got, in fact, 90.2. Do I want that to be 90? Well, no. Yeah, there we are. Okay. So this is how you create these frames. And the last bit of business about this, by the way, I might want to select these and kind of show that in some cases the geometry when you bring it in may not actually be on a whole number. In this case I've got -0.5 and 7.5 to make it fit exactly. And then over here under the scale, notice it's -1 because it's kind of a mirror image of this piece. And that's pretty much how you create these. I try to just put a little hutch in here to make it more interesting. And you can make as ornate a frame as you want. You can actually scale things up like these rocks, etc. So feel free to try and make this nice. The last bit of cleanup you're going to want to do is remember that when you're playing this game, you don't want to obstruct a lot of things. So if you go into the game, we have some problems here. We got this cow skull kind of on top of a build spot. We've got this cactus kind of impinging upon the path itself. And so what you want to do is come back to scene and just grab those items and actually shuffle them over. Maybe put them in a spot where they're going to be non-obtrusive. And I don't like to bunch up too many of the things. I like to sort of spread them out a bit, these little props. And you can grab those in props as well. That's in a different area. You've actually got, under terrain is where your individual pieces are for the ground. Under props is where your individual pieces are for the props that you bring in, the cacti, the ribs, things like that. And I just, pop them on in the same way that we did with ground, pieces of the ground, just kind of drag it in. And then from here, drag it down to props. And now it's part of this group. What's very important to note when you're saving this, of course, is the fact that the menu will save the group props. So if it's not in the group, it won't be saved. And you can do a lot of work and it won't be part of props. And in the end, you'll be very sad because unfortunately it was not put in the correct folder and it was not saved. So under this, I'm going to make sure that it's in the props right here. So it's going to save everything under props. When I select the folder, it gives this an orange outline letting me know, yes, indeed, it's part of props. Little simple trick I like to use is just kind of lower things in Y until you start seeing the ground swallow it up there. And then it's kind of level. Otherwise, you can sit here, for a very long time looking at something that doesn't really matter. And move the cow skull out of the way. Make sure I've got the cow skull, not the ground. And is that also a cow skull? Is that something? See, this is a mistake. I kind of stopped the game. This may be a cow skull that is part of the game, and it's not a prop. I can tell because when I click on it, it does not. Oh, no, it does. Oh, my. Well, there we are. That's a problem, isn't it? So now we need to move this out of the way as well. There we go. I can do that. And in fact, I feel a bit cheeky. So I'm going to put this on the rock. That's right. I'm all about shock. And let's just make this into some sort of a desert snowman. There we are. That's awful. It's not even aligned properly. Okay, so that's cute. Peekaboo. So this is how you arrange things. There should be some deviation in the frame. It's really the last thing you need to worry about. So don't sweat this as much as you should sweat just creating a nice level, because you're going to change things again and again. You can scale them up, as you can see. But we don't want to have things just really, the cacti can't be different sizes and whatnot. Some of these other elements are okay with me, making them different sizes, but try to make them fairly consistent. Also come in, kind of check things out, make sure you don't have any of these little cracks. If they are little cracks in the pavement, come over here to where your numbers are. You may want to check things out and make sure that they're whole numbers. Things tend to be either whole numbers here, or they tend to be whole numbers with a fraction of 0.5. But there's no silliness like 0.2, 0.3, things like that. It's either whole numbers or exactly half of a 1 value, 0.5, in some increment. So now that this is all done nicely, the way I want it, I bring up the import level, I make sure I've got 9, and then I said save props. And it has done so. So this is how you want to be able to change your levels using the import level. This is the last thing you need to worry about. I would prefer people to spend a majority of the time on the level itself. So just save this video to when you're ready to kind of pretty things up. You may want to try it once or twice, but other than that, you should leave well enough alone and just worry on the level. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you very much.